Syria also dominated talks between Russia's president and British prime minister in London, where they met ahead of the G8 summit, both leaders saying they shared common ground on the need for diplomatic solutions to the crisis. But as RT's Polly Boyko reports from London, differences still remain.
Well, the leaders both said that they are committed to having a diplomatic resolution to the Syrian crisis. They are committed to organising this so-called Geneva II conference, which will see both sides come to the negotiating table in order to discuss a peaceful way out of the crisis. But at the same time, they both admitted that they have very different approaches and analyses of the situation in Syria at the moment. While David Cameron says that Bashar al-Assad is to blame for everything that's taking place and that he must go, Vladimir Putin says it's less clear, and he thinks that both sides are to blame. Now, we know that David Cameron has supported the idea of lifting the EU arms embargo, of sending military aid to the Syrian rebels. Britain hasn't committed itself to that yet. However, they have definitely been discussing it. They've supported the US taking that step. Now, Vladimir Putin isn't sure about what will happen if arms are sent to Syria and if they fall into the wrong hands.
When it comes to selling weapons to Assad's government and who's responsible for the blood, including of children, I don't think you'll deny that both sides are responsible. There's always the question of who's to blame. I don't think you'll deny that we shouldn't support people opening up other people's bodies and eating their entrails on camera. Do you want to support these people? Do you want to arm them?
Vladimir Putin, in response to a journalist's question about why Russia provides arms to Syria, he was quite frank. He said Russia provides defensive weapons to the legitimate Syrian government. It's not breaking any laws while it does so, and he calls on every other government to act within the framework of international law. So while we've got both leaders talking about seeking out a diplomatic solution, on the face of it, on the other side, we've got some very different action from the British government. So at the moment, it's unclear how successful even planning this peace conference is going to be at the G8 summit over the next 2 days.
Let's discuss the exchange on Syria between Russian and British leaders with Professor Mark Almond, a professor of international relations, joining us live from Oxford. So does London's persistence that the Assad regime must step down and that its support for Syrian rebels, does that square with the organization of this proposed peace conference?
Well, this is a big problem, isn't it? If you want to have preconditions which essentially say that one party to the conference is going to leave early and is basically going to be excluded, and you've decided who the legitimate government of Syria is going to be in its place, then it makes it very difficult to hold the conference. However, David Cameron and the Americans face the great problem that they're not at all clear who from the opposition side is going to come. And so there's a serious doubt that, in a sense, the West is trying to stage a conference on its own terms, but without really being in control of the rebels who it wishes to see come out from that conference as effectively the approved rulers of Syria.
Do you think the UK may follow Washington's lead here and also supply direct arms to the rebels, or do you think it may take a different tact?
Well, of course, as David Cameron admitted in an earlier interview today, Britain is supplying various forms of assistance to the rebels, and some of these so-called non-lethal forms of aid, of course, help people to actually set off roadside bombs and to target their weapons. So we're moving step by step to that. What he faces is a huge problem in his own party, across Parliament, in his allies in the Liberal Democrats, and I think in public opinion, which has seen that the real enemy of President Assad, the real people doing the fighting, are not the salon generals sitting in expensive hotels in Istanbul making televised appeals for aid. They're the much more serious Islamic fundamentalist groups, some of them drawing people from Britain and other European countries, including Sweden and Belgium. And people are rather worried, are we going to be supporting the kind of people who will turn their weapons back on us? And some of the people who try to reassure us, like one of the British government-sponsored Libyan rebels who helped fight Colonel Gaddafi, but fought the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, then fought the Americans, recently told German television, oh, don't worry, our fighters going to Syria are not going to come and fight you in Europe. They're going to go on to Russia and China afterwards. Well, that may be reassuring to some people in Europe, but hardly to the Russian or Chinese governments or peoples.
And now Cameron, though, does seem confident that the arms that they may send or the assistance that's getting to rebels are going to the right rebels, so to speak. What do you think makes him so sure that it will get into the right hands?
I find it almost impossible to believe that he's really thought through what he's saying. Precisely because even the most optimistic analysis of the rebels would have to admit there are a variety of people not only fighting Assad, but also fighting each other. The whole idea that we can be confident that the weapons we supply, even if we give them to people we train, will stay in those hands, and those hands won't turn against us, seems to me to be extremely naive. In practice, I'm afraid, the risk is that the sort of people who will actually make use of these weapons may initially be primarily against Assad. But we've seen from Afghanistan over the last 30 years to the present day, we can see from the chaos in Libya, where American diplomats have been killed, British attacked, it's very unwise to think that we really do control these people on the ground.
And finally, briefly, if you can, the U.S. is considering a no-fly zone over Syria. Do you think that the EU and Britain would back them up on that?
Well, they might back them up, but whether they would agree to take part in a no-fly zone not approved by the UN, even the French government has said it would have to have UN approval. And it's difficult to see Russia and China agreeing without some very, very clear concessions about what it is all about. So it would not have to be another Libyan open-ended no-fly zone, which in fact was a regime change bombing raid.
All right, Mark Almond, historian and visiting professor at Bilkent University in Ankara, Turkey. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.